The Saturday Morning Snap is a one-stop fantasy shop, bringing weekly news and advice in under an hour. I'm Mackenzie Tout, joined by Landon Monula. Welcome to the podcast. We are back with another fantasy football podcast live on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play Music, or however you may be listening. We want to welcome you into the show. It is Wednesday, November 14th, episode 32 of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Mackenzie Tout, joined by my friend Landon Monula. What is going on, pal? How's your week been?
Can we get on more podcast platforms? Are there any more?
Yeah, there's a couple. We just don't mention them.
Oh, okay. Just checking. I am doing good, my friend. I got off work early tonight. Can't wait to talk about some fantasy football with you. Yeah, it was a good weekend. I hear there's a really good weekend for your fantasy teams.
Oh, man. I don't know what the deal. I don't know if the stars just aligned or if my teams are just rounding into form, but for the second time this year, we co-manage a couple teams, me and you, and I play in a couple on my own, but I manage 6 leagues altogether, and we went 6-0 for the second time this year. There's a couple leagues that we play in where it's tough to break 100 points, like 110 is a really good score. Across 6 leagues, my smallest output was 137, and I had a 222 in there.
That sounds just lucky to me.
You know what? It is an inflated league for scoring, but I think my team's averaging like 180. But regardless, it was a great week for me for fantasy, and I don't know why. It's not like all my teams have the same players. It's just, I don't know if we're just making the right pickups or the right starts, or if we're just doing all the right things here. Maybe to go across 6 teams to have everything happen like that. Maybe, I don't know, but it was certainly a great week for fantasy.
Early on, you mentioned that you had some of the worst luck when it came to points for and against. So finally, the tide is turned to your favor, and you're not playing against the hardest teams, the highest scoring teams in the league. And there you go. That shows out. So remember to follow us on Instagram at the Saturday Morning Snap. I am on Twitter at Landon_SMS, and you are on at Mac_SMS.
Yes, sir.
News this week. Everyone's talking about the man of the year, Mr. Le'Veon Bell, did not show up at 4 o'clock today for training camp. Or not training camp, for
practice.
Steelers. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is something that you and I have been talking about at length, and it's sort of persisted since the offseason, since this initial report broke that he might not be returning to the Steelers this season. And I'll give you credit. You did mention a couple weeks ago that you thought that Le'Veon Bell would not return. And even with the farewell Miami tweet, you still said, you know what? I'm digging my heels in. I stick by the fact that I think that Le'Veon Bell's not going to play this year. And it looks like he's not showing up by 4 o'clock. And that means that he's out for the rest of the season. Now, the fantasy implications here is that you lose Le'Veon Bell.
Yep.
What does it mean for Le'Veon Bell next year? Because under my understanding, he can be franchise tagged by the Steelers again next year, but there is a difference, correct?
So the difference between the franchise tag that he was, the 14 point something million dollars, is next year it's going up. They have to franchise him with the QB rate, which is quite a bit more. I don't have the exact number. I'm going to find it really quick.
I believe it's $10 million more.
So at $24 million franchise tag, even if Le'Veon was willing to play next year, that is a lot for a team to burden, especially if they have an absolute young star like James Conner. So just like I kind of predicted, I didn't really have that number in mind. I knew there was a difference why they wouldn't franchise tag him, but that makes no sense why the Pittsburgh Steelers would pay him that kind of money. So he is going to be a free agent and will be signing with the highest bidder.
Yeah, it's a crazy situation. I can't believe it's really come to this, but as we sort of pivot from the Le'Veon Bell conversation, because for fantasy, he means nothing more to us, but the people that have to be really, really happy in this situation, the James Conner owners, certainly.
Absolutely. Now, as you have here, he is day-to-day with a concussion, but I expect him to play. Keep that monitor. We're still recording on Tuesday, so we'll see what happens.
Tomlin came out in an interview today and said he addressed the Le'Veon Bell concern with, what if Le'Veon Bell doesn't come back? I think at that point he had about 30 minutes until the 4 p.m. deadline. And Tomlin said, if he doesn't show up, so be it. And then they asked him, okay, well, what about James Conner? He's still in concussion protocol. He said yes, but he's expected to practice tomorrow, which would be Wednesday, right now when you're listening. So keep your eye. If you're a James Conner owner, he should be practicing today. That is the expected schedule for Conner.
And you can practice when you're still in protocol, and that will be good news. It's just, we'll see how he progresses. I do expect him to play, and he's going to be a running back one rest of the season. He is going to be, and we'll talk about it later on in the show, he's going to be on a majority of championship-winning teams. He's the obvious answer. He was picked up for free, late rounds as a handcuff. We don't normally recommend to handcuff your players, but if you did and had James Conner as a Lev Bell owner, you're winning your league.
At the end of the season, it was Le'Veon Bell was the James Conner handcuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we saw that happen in one of our leagues. What was the trade? It was something hilarious.
It was
Minnesota defense.
It was Le'Veon Bell, Greg Zuerlein, and Vikings defense for a 7th round pick.
For a 7th round pick. So now what it ends up being, and this is a redraft league, you can't keep Le'Veon Bell because he was drafted in the first 2 rounds, and we do a 2-player keeper. Yeah. But you can't keep Le'Veon Bell. So this team basically traded a kicker and a defense for a 7th round pick.
And I mean,
you hate to see it.
I don't blame him for wanting to try to handcuff your stud in James Conner, especially with a questionable tag beside his name. But yeah, I mean, it was a high price to pay, but this guy's number one in our league, and he was throwing around draft picks like they were candy.
He's no longer number one, sir.
Oh, did you sneak up there?
We are tied. He lost this week. We are tied, and I have overtaken him with the points.
Wow. Congrats, man.
Bang. It's been a long grind.
I think he might be listening to us. So do you have a message for Aaron in our league?
Aaron, your team is amazing, and I hope I don't have to play in the playoffs.
That's a fair message. All right, moving on. Unfortunately, Cooper Kupp tore his ACL. He would have been on a lot of potential championship-winning teams. He was having a great season at a cheap price. That whole LA Rams offense, if you have one of their players, you're doing pretty well.
From one of the 3, the Musketeers, we'll call them, Cooks, Woods, Kupp, any of those 3 guys, you were flying high, doing well. Jared Goff delivering the ball with precision, on a consistent basis, and Todd Gurley, just the one-man fantasy machine. The Rams are just clicking, but now Cooper Kupp tore his left ACL, out for the season. Who's the guy up next to the plate that's going to step up and fill that role?
I was about to ask you that, but I would put my money on Josh Reynolds. He's a rookie wide receiver. He did perform. He's performed somewhat well this season in the absence with injuries happening on that team, and he's going to be a very popular waiver wire ad this week. Just with the pure volume, I think he just steps up and will fill hopefully a slot role. Against Green Bay, he had 5 targets, only 3 receptions, but he had 2 touchdowns. So that number those 2 touchdowns will inflate his ads. But now with Kupp out, he's going to he's probably my number 1 or number 2 ad of the week. If I were to rank it like that. There's also 2 tight ends on that team, Higbee and Everett. I can see a little bit of usage. They both got a few targets last week. Their usage will step up a little bit because Kupp was such a reliable target for Jared Goff. So I think it's going to be a little bit more messy, but Woods and Brandon Cooks are the main guys that will continue really just killing it for that team.
My boy Randall Cobb.
Randall Cobb, unfortunately, is not traveling with the team to Seattle. This just means big things for your boy.
MVP. I mean MVS.
Could be an MVP. You never know. That's another. You just want a piece of that offense, right?
Yeah. You know what? With the emergence of Aaron Jones this week, I retweeted a tweet. I can't remember who it was. Oh, JJ Zacharyson. And he's like, Aaron Jones and Green Bay fans have been saying we need to give Aaron Jones the football in week 1. When he comes back from his suspension, give the guy the ball. And then it was like Mike McCarthy in week 10. And it's a gif of Ben Roethlisberger just stone-faced, and all of a sudden he's like, oh. Like, Mike McCarthy had the light bulb moment in week 10 where he actually finally saw like what everybody else saw in Aaron Jones. But no, I think with Aaron Jones making the emergence and Marquez Valdes-Scantling being a huge target for Aaron Rodgers, and Devontae Adams is so underrated. He's so talented and so good at what he does. I mean, I'm still very confident in the team to continue to make a push for the playoffs. It's going to be a long road, but I'm hopeful that they can do that. But fantasy-wise, I think they're going to be okay. And this should be a good matchup between Green Bay and Seattle on Thursday night. I mean, finally we have a good Thursday night game. But I think with Cobb not being in, I don't think it hurts the Packers. I think it just means more opportunity for Devontae Adams, MVS, and Aaron Jones.
Yep, I like that. Is Rob Gronkowski going to be on the highest percentage of teams that do not make the playoffs?
Maybe.
Right? He single-handedly screwed me out of a championship run this year in our Gridiron League.
Yeah, and he's been hurting me in Dynasty. You know, he was a piece that I've been relying on, especially last year when I won our championship in the Dynasty League. This year, I've been missing that piece all year. And I think in the 6 leagues that I play in, 4 of those teams, I have Zach Ertz on, and he's been amazing this year. Certainly showed up for me this week. But Rob Gronkowski, absolute ghost. Now, he is set to return in week 12. The Patriots are on the bye this coming week. So the bye week kind of comes at a good time for Gronk and the Patriots after getting absolutely embarrassed by the Titans in week 10. But I don't know. I really don't know what the future holds for Rob Gronkowski, if he's gonna give you enough, if he's gonna be healthy enough where he can give you solid games to help you make that playoff push. I think if you have him, you have to start him. But what you get at the tight end position is not a whole lot anyway. So if he gives you 0, then it is what it is. But it's a crazy situation for a guy that you drafted to be almost bulletproof.
He's only surpassed 10 points in half-point league 3 times this season. And his only really good game, his only touchdown came in week 1. So that just goes to show how big of a disappointment Rob Gronkowski is, and it's too bad. I don't even know if I highly doubt he is back for next season. So I actually saw a report online that he's likely not coming back. So this is probably Gronk's final year, and hopefully, if you have him, he helps you either. If you've made the playoffs, win some matchups.
I'm going to start shopping Gronk in Dynasty before he goes to WWE.
Yeah, once the season's over, shop him for anything you can.
Oh, what's this? A coming out party?
All right, let's hit the week 10 studs. The guys that won you the week, the guys that stepped up and got things done for you. Who do you want to start with?
I will. So I've got right here, I've got the the wide receivers that really had a good game. Some were surprising and some were not. My start of the week last week, Corey Davis, 7 receptions, 125 yards and a touchdown. Had a great game against a pretty stout or a pretty good New England defense. I started New England a couple places. I thought, especially in DFS, and obviously the Titans really rolled over them. So he had a big game. Obviously, the man of the week was Tyreek Hill. 2 touchdowns, 117 yards, and 20 rush yards. Really good game. That's what you get out of Tyreek Hill. You have these giant games. It completely goes off, and then you might have 5 receptions for 35 yards, and that's all she wrote.
Right.
Anyone you want to talk to about the wide receiver studs of the week that impressed you?
You know what? For the people that joined us on Sunday for our AMA on Sleeper, I told a bunch of you, and myself included, sit down Allen Robinson. He struggled with injury. He hasn't been great this year. Just make him earn a spot on your roster. And having 6 receptions for 133 yards and 2 touchdowns this week, he certainly earned his spot back on your roster. And I'm sorry that you didn't get to cash in on that performance. But to be completely honest with you, no one saw that coming, right? With how good Taylor Gabriel had been, and he was a dud. You really expected, right. You really expected a lot more out of Gabriel with the weeks prior in consideration. Anthony Miller had been good. Trey Burton was involved. The run game was great. No one saw Allen Robinson doing what he did. It was really out of the blue. I mean, I played him in one league because I had a backup quarterback on my bench and 4 guys on bye, and I was stuck playing Allen Robinson in my flex. And I was pleasantly surprised. But my advice to everyone was sit Allen Robinson down and wait until he earns a spot. And he did. And we got to move forward with that. So, he earned it. So start him.
It's funny. He was probably on one of those teams that are last in the league, and they're playing a pretty good team or a team in playoff contention. And they came out and won and then upsetted a championship winning team because those players are game changers when it happens.
Right.
So Michael Thomas and Brandon Cooks both had good games. Michael Thomas had a couple touchdowns. Brandon Cooks had 100 yards and a touchdown. Some really good running backs, and I want to let me know who you really want to talk about. David Johnson came back to life and had a great game. Christian McCaffrey, who we talked about Saturday morning. Zeke Elliott is just an absolute machine and is getting it done through the air more often than he did last year. And then these 2 guys, Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones, really came out. And I think, didn't Chubb break off a 75-yard touchdown or 90-yard?
92. Dang,
he is. So he's becoming one of those later rookie stud running backs, and you don't blame Cleveland for getting rid of Carlos Hyde.
No, listen, McCaffrey and Elliott, as far as I'm concerned, are foregone conclusions that they would be studs. It's nothing new to us at this point. It was good to see Zeke have a good game. But David Johnson, to me, is the guy that I really wanted to see going, especially with a change in play calling with the offensive coordinator shift to Byron Leftwich. It's crazy how when you call different plays that a player can make such a bigger impact. And when you get him involved in the right way, an elite level player can make a huge difference in your team.
That's the difference, absolutely.
Right. So nothing has changed in David Johnson. It's not like he's just had an epiphany and now he's a much better football player. He's being utilized in the right manner. And this is something that we hadn't seen him be in that position the whole year. So really, really happy to see David Johnson being used this way. And when I talked about him in the offseason, this is the guy that I was talking about. This, if you watch tape on him from 2016, where he almost had that 1,000 season that I keep talking about, this is the way he was utilized. So it's good to see him return to that, and Arizona sort of understand that this is the way the guy needs to be used. Now,
And
go ahead.
he was a scary guy to own. He lost you a bunch of matchups on his own last of where you drafted him. And he's a guy that if you had the balls to trade for a guy like that, he could lose you your playoff weeks if you traded for him. No, I'm not talking picks, I'm talking players. Get him on your team, and then he kind of puts that 5.6, the 8.5, nothing special. But this is the guy that actually could be, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, on a lot of championship teams. If you're in the playoffs or looking close to it, and you have a David Johnson, his schedule is looking really good rest of the season.
Absolutely. Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones both had great days. Nick Chubb, his numbers look a little bit better than what he was efficiency-wise because he had that one play for 92 yards and a score. So that sort of skews his numbers. But regardless, he was awesome. And Aaron Jones was every bit exciting as we thought that he could be. And given the work, the guy gets it done. I can't remember his exact carry count at this point. I think it was 14 for like 143.
Yeah, 15 attempts for 145 and 2 touchdowns.
There you go. 15. So you're looking at about 9.5 a carry and 2 scores.
Dang.
It's what we thought Aaron Jones could do if given the opportunity. And Jamal Williams played a very, very small role in this game. It was all Aaron Jones. And the Packers, in all honesty, the Packers should have won by about 40. It was sloppy at times, but they got it done against a very poor Miami Dolphins team. But give credit to these younger guys that are stepping up and making some plays. The other stud that I can't let go is Ben Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger, Drew Brees was sensational once again. That whole Saints team is just studly. I can't really single out one guy. I mean, Drew Brees is the one that leads them, but oh my goodness, the Saints are unbelievable. So,
yeah. So
ride your Saints off into the sunset like you did last year because nothing's changed.
You know what trade I saw happen a couple of weeks ago? A team was selling off, and then a championship team was buying, and they traded for Aaron Rodgers. They traded Aaron Rodgers and a 6th round pick for Ben Roethlisberger and Nick Chubb and like a 13th round pick. Funny how things happen a little differently than you hope. If you want to buy a stud like Aaron Rodgers, and then you sell 2 guys that are studs in their own right.
It's crazy how perception can change just by time.
Yeah. So some stud tight ends. No big surprise that Zach Ertz
went ham.
Went absolute bananas, bonkers. 2 touchdowns. And Eric Ebron came back to life despite Jack Doyle being on the field and had a couple touchdowns on his own. So
you mean Eric Ebron James?
That's the one and the same. He continues to be a red zone presence, and he's gonna screw your team if he doesn't catch those red zone passes. But you start him if you got him, I guess. What else do you do in this tight end landscape? Yeah,
it's like if you don't own Ertz, Kelsey, or Kittle at this point, like you're losing out. Eric Ebron, no doubt, he's been amazing. I'm not sure if it continues into the playoffs. I'm not sure if he's going to be that fantasy winning piece that a lot of teams will have on their team. But to me, at this point, it's if you don't have those 3 guys, you're losing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some letdowns.
Psst, take a seat, pal.
The best streaming defense of the week that played the Buffalo Bills got you like negative points, I think.
The Jets were unbelievably bad. Like, just watching this game, I was at the gym finishing up a workout. It was, nearing 1:00. I thought, okay, I'll jump on, I'll finish out with some cardio, and we'll watch the first, half of the quarter of the game, whatever's on. And unfortunately, it was the Bills and Jets. So, I'm watching this game. I'm like, oh, okay, we'll see what Barkley can do. Airs it out for like 50 yards. You're like, okay. 2 plays later, Shady runs it in 25 yards. You're like, what is going on? And the beating never stopped. And
yeah,
I had even on a couple DraftKings team taken Jets D, and they were worth cash. It's not like you were saving money. Like, everyone got this wrong. Everyone got this wrong. And the Bills, this is not the first time the Bills have surprised us. Flashback when
Vikings,
they beat the Vikings. Like, that screwed me and a million other people out of survivor pools. The Jets let us down, and the Bills just surprised again. So I don't even know. I don't even want to talk about it any further, but it was ridiculous.
When your defense makes Shady McCoy look like the slippery fish again, something's wrong.
That's a guy on our list, Mike Evans. I mean, you expected. I think I expected a lot more out of just the whole Tampa Bay offense.
You thought this list was again from last week because Mike Evans was the top of the duds list once again.
I accidentally deleted all of your hard work because I thought that this was just the same crap from last week, and not realizing that here we go again. But I expected a lot more out of Mike Evans. When you look at this guy, okay, sure, 3 receptions for 51 yards. It's not the end of the world. In a half-point league, it's like 7 points, right? Here's the thing that's frustrating. Ryan Fitzpatrick had 403 yards passing, and the Bucks scored 3 damn points.
Yep. And Mike Evans should be that. I mean, they have great red zone presence with Evans and OJ Howard. Why? I didn't watch the game, but actually, as a caveat, this isn't the second Sunday of the year that I haven't watched any like primetime 1:00, 4:00 football. And
that's really, an absolute travesty.
I'm really sad about it. I couldn't see any of these great games, but I watched a little bit of Sunday night and I watched Monday night and end of the game Monday night. But I know
it just and OJ Howard's a guy you talk about. He was 1 for 15.
Terrible.
It's like if Ryan Fitzpatrick is 406 yards passing, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns, obviously. Who's he throwing to? Chris Godwin, 7 for 103. Jacquizz Rodgers, 8 for 102.
Wow,
Djax was typical Djax, 5 for 67. Humphreys 2 for 53, Mike Evans 3 for 51, and the rest is just the scraps. But you've got 200 yards receivers, Chris Godwin, Jacquizz Rodgers, most likely on most people's benches.
Yep.
How does a guy like Jacquizz Rodgers get 8 targets and Mike Evans only gets 6?
Is he a fake stud? Is he a mirage? Is he not a real stud at the running back position?
Who? Jacquizz Rodgers?
No, Mike Evans. Is he a mirage? Is Evans not the guy that we think he is?
Oh, you said running back position at the wide receiver position.
Sorry, I meant wide receiver. All right, is Mike Evans
I don't know.
A fake stud? He's had big games. He's had
if Mike Evans catches a touchdown, if he catches their only touchdown, it's not a bad game. It's a 12-point outing.
Yeah.
Right?
He's had 4 games over 100 yards. He's had not that long ago, he had 179 yards and a touchdown with 13 targets. I don't know what's changed. I mean, I think it might have been Winston throwing him that ball, but either way, still too bad. I do like Mike Evans with Fitzmagic, but I don't know. It's tough. Tough sledding.
A guy that I was super disappointed with this week, and I don't have any shares of him, but James White absolutely dropped the ball. 1 rushing attempt for -5 yards.
How does that happen?
5 receptions for 31 yards. How does it happen? This whole New England Patriots offense just they just laid an egg. Like there's no way around it. And James White, if you just really didn't see something like this happening, if you look back to his last, I don't even know his whole season, but you go to the last 6 fantasy weeks. 25.3, 20.4, 25.7, 12, 18.7, 27.2. Like, he's giving you consistent week winning production from a guy that you didn't draft to be that guy. And then he comes out and he goes the first time in 10 weeks, single digit outing in a game that you really thought the Patriots had a good chance to win. I mean, the Titans have looked awful at times, and then they come out and just steamroll the Patriots. It's weeks like this where you sit there and you go, like, the NFL is a coin flip league. Anybody can win on any given week, and there's literally no explanation to it. So it makes you scratch your head. You don't understand why. But I thought James White should have been a hell of a lot better than he was.
I completely agree. It was a great matchup for him. I know the Titans defense at times have looked really good, but it's their inept offense that keeps their defense on the field so often. So who would have thought that they could upset the Patriots? Pretty much nobody. So a couple guys on this list, and one I think I want to spend a little bit more time talking about, and that's Jarvis Landry. He was in a good matchup, and Baker Mayfield looked really good at a very high passer rating.
Yeah, 151.3 was 85% completion rate.
Atlanta's defense is so terrible, and Jarvis has 5 targets, 2 receptions, only 22 yards. What do you do with a guy like Jarvis Landry? If you can't play well against the Atlanta Falcons, how are you going to play well against Houston coming up, Carolina, Denver, like Cincinnati they have after the bye, and that's a decent matchup, but do you have confidence starting Jarvis Landry?
Jarvis Landry to me is, I said this last week, if Jarvis Landry can't give you a good week against a very porous Atlanta Falcons passing defense, I'm out. I'm out on Jarvis. I'm waiting for better days. I'm just not going to roll him out anymore. It's so frustrating, and I'll grant it that most of this game was determined by Nick Chubb. 20 attempts, 176 yards, a touchdown, was involved in the passing game. He was really just used so much. But Baker Mayfield was great. He was spreading the ball around. He was getting guys looks. Jarvis Landry wasn't the number one clear-cut winner in the target category, and for that, it doesn't mean good things going forward. And I've sung Jarvis Landry's praises probably more than a lot of people, and a month ago you probably couldn't have got him off me for a lot of people, and now I'm willing to sell him for whatever. It's crazy how fantasy can make you feel this way, but I said if Jarvis can't get it done against the Falcons, I'm out.
Yeah. The last guy that had a bad week, started over 75% of leagues, and that is Jimmy Graham. He had only 1 target. He caught that 1 target. It was a great catch. But what do you do with Jimmy Graham? You can't do much. It could be the same narrative where it was an Aaron Jones game, but having only 1 target, that doesn't show well for Jimmy.
No, the way that Jimmy Graham's been used in this offense, I really was wrong about it. He's not the red zone threat. He's not the high target, the volume guy that he was in Seattle. He's certainly not what we thought he could be. He's been used more in the blocking game, blocking tight end. So his role is a lot different than I thought, and it's really affecting his fantasy output. Given a really good situation with Aaron Rodgers in a good, traditionally good offense, 1 for 14 is it's very Jimmy Graham-like at this point, and disappointing, man, disappointing.
Yep, but that's how she goes. That's fantasy football for you, and the tight end position as a whole. We had a league mate in our Gridiron League try to petition to get rid of the tight end spot on its own and just make it a flex spot. And no, we're not doing that.
You can't do that.
It's one of those things where like then you would never get tight ends wouldn't be drafted. The Ertzes of the world would be drafted later, and you take a risk at picking those skill positions early so that you can have what's the word I'm looking for? An edge over someone else. That
it's
waits.
very strategic.
But then if you wait and get a George Kittle, or you get an Ebron who's having a great season, or Austin Hooper had another great game, then the guy who drafted Gronk early is now really hurting. So that's just the name of the game, my friend.
Listen, we've had some big rest of season questions that need answering, that need debating and talking about. So we have a couple questions lined up for you guys, and they've been ones that I've been texted or tweeted. But basically, these are questions that people have that might affect the rest of their seasons. And so I thought it was good to maybe air out some of our dirty laundry here and get down to brass taxes on some of these issues. So, I think you have a really good question here, and we sort of at playoff time think about some of these players, but what players do you believe that are going to be on about 75 to 80% of championship winning teams come the end of week 16? Who are going to be the consistent pieces that get those guys the championships?
Yeah, and this year so far, I mean, James Conner is an obvious choice of who's won you the weeks this year. Alvin Kamara has won you the weeks this year. Todd Gurley, but they're not necessarily your MVPs because you drafted them to be those guys. Saquon Barkley's been great for you.
Well, I would argue, depending on when you drafted, James Conner wasn't a top level pick.
Right. No. Yeah. Good point.
So James Conner to me is one of the clear-cut winners for fantasy MVPs because, if you drafted mid to late August, you were getting James Conner in the double-digit rounds, right?
Right.
So now you if you went running back to start a draft and you got like Alvin Kamara and I don't know, give me a name, Leonard Fournette, Joe Mixon. Sure. If you had those, and then you throw James Conner in the mix, now you're starting two top 5 pieces plus flexing another, so your team is so overpowered because of James Conner.
Yeah. So what we're going to talk about today is who we think are going to actually be on the most teams end of season. So maybe there's some guys that are going to have a good rest of season schedule. Number one, are going to be you've got your stud running backs like the Melvin Gordons of the world, but you have these players that you got late as well. So who's number one for you at the running back position that you think is going to win people some championships this year?
I think running back position, if you were able to acquire this player because of his very poor start or his lack of involvement in the offense or how they're utilizing him, I think David Johnson is a very good candidate. And the change in the play calling and the offensive coordinating for the Arizona Cardinals makes a huge difference in the way that David Johnson was used last week. And you saw it, number 3 fantasy running back on the week at 33 points. So David Johnson has been this elite talent, but it's crazy how a change in the offense can create such a bigger impact on the field. And I've already said that, but it's so true. And so David Johnson hasn't been the stud that you've wanted him to be up until this point. But if you went out on a limb and you acquired a guy like David Johnson when he was worth his lowest of lows, you might reap the benefits moving forward. David Johnson might be that piece going into the playoffs with a very juicy playoff schedule that gets you that fantasy championship.
I like that pick. I think he has a good choice or chance. After this week, he really showed that he can He caught almost 100 yards. He ran for almost 100 yards and had a couple touchdowns. So it's a great choice. So I'm going to go on two directions here. Pat Mahomes has, first of all, gotten you this far. And I think he still will be on a lot of championship teams. However, I think a quarterback in particular that's going to be on a lot of championship teams is Cam Newton. We talked about him last week as a guy to acquire. They have a middling record. They did lose pretty horribly to Pittsburgh, but I think that'll just fuel the fire under Cam Newton. They have Detroit, Seattle. Those are okay, kind of tough maybe, but then Tampa Bay, Cleveland, New Orleans, Atlanta, New Orleans again. They're going to be fighting for a playoff spot. He's going to do a lot with his legs on his own. He's going to forget to not run because once it comes to the end of the season, he's going to have to do everything in his power to win. And I think that's Cam for you. He's got MVP written all over him if they make a good run. I don't think he's going to win it, but because there's a lot of other very good players. But he's a candidate. He's having that kind of season that he did when he actually won. So I think Cam Newton's gonna do well this year.
I like that pick. I recently saw a tweet which is pretty funny. It was like Pat Mahomes over Cam Newton over everybody else.
Okay.
So it's like, if you look, Jared Goff is actually right now the number 2 fantasy quarterback on the year after this week. He's 65 points behind Pat Mahomes.
I know. Crazy.
Which is insane.
Depends what league you're looking at, settings, because Matt Ryan's up there too, actually, if different
in the scoring that I'm looking at, default half point league, 6-point touchdown league. So scoring's inflated a tiny bit, but Matt Ryan is 2 points behind Jared Goff.
Right.
So
there you go.
Pat Mahomes has a huge lead at the position and is making a massive difference. I think he's outscoring Aaron Rodgers by 140 points on the year so far.
That's absolutely insane, and
that's 14 points a week.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, he kind of leaves you speechless. He's breaking records. He's going against everything that we know is correct.
And a lot of people had doubts, myself included, about Pat Mahomes and his ability to come in, with limited experience and just put things together and lead this Kansas City team, albeit very talented and very capable offensively, to be that leader and make this team what we think it could be. He's answered every single question and then some. And
I mean, there was reports in the offseason of him throwing like 4 interceptions at practice.
Yeah,
and
the reports didn't look good.
He's only thrown 2, 4, 6, 7 all season. So hey, that's excellent. That's amazing. He's killing it, that guy. Let's go over to wide receivers. My pick for wide receiver that's going to be on a lot of teams, and I'll go with the later round pick first. I've got a couple top end guys that I think are going to really show out rest of season, but that's going to be Robert Woods. Mm-hmm. And I'm, as a caveat, I'm going to say if the Rams lose to Kansas City, I think Robert Woods is going to be on a great team. And you could take Brandon Cooks in the same conversation, but Brandon Cooks was taken a little bit earlier, and he's having a very similar season. So with that said, if the Rams lose and they need to win out. They want to get home field advantage. They're going to go absolutely ham. They're going KC ham. They're going to throw tons of footballs. Hopefully they're going to be in a lot of close games, run up the points, show how dominant they are, and Robert Woods is going to be a benefactor for that. So I just have a feeling that Robert Woods, especially now that Cooper Kupp is down as well, he's going to be the wide receiver 3 on that team, but he's going to play like a wide receiver 1. So that's my early prediction, my kind of stretch of a prediction on championship teams come the offseason.
I like it.
What wide receiver do you like? What do you think that's going to be? And there might not be a consistent one. There might not be one that's going to be on 75-80% of teams. But
I-
is there one in particular that stands out to you that's going to be on a lot of winning teams?
So, as of right now, my answer would be that an MVP at the receiving position has been Tyler Boyd. No doubt. You picked him up off waivers. He's a wide receiver, a fringe wide receiver 1.
Or
2, 4,
Yep.
6, 8, 10, 12. He's wide receiver 15 right now in the year, so he's just on the cusp of being a wide receiver 1. He's been great. You picked him up off waivers. He's given you everything you've wanted as a flex play. Now he's probably in your starting lineup play. Do I think that that's going to continue? I don't. Just looking forward to who he has to play to get you to the playoffs and then give you strong performances through the playoffs. Baltimore this coming week, Cleveland the week after, then Denver, Chargers. Week 15 he plays the Raiders, so potentially a good opportunity there, and then has to play Cleveland again. So some really good passing defenses in there, and we saw what happened last week when the Bengals get down, they tend to crumble. There's little resiliency in this offense, and so for Tyler Boyd, it's not a knock on him, it's maybe a knock on the offense. So Tyler Boyd has been an MVP for you up until this point, but I don't think he'll be that piece on championship winning teams. I'm going to pivot, and this is going to come as a surprise to you. I don't have it written down, but Stephon Diggs is going to be the championship winning piece. I acquired him from you on a very generous fire sale, I have to say. Stephon Diggs has given you big games so far this year. He has been out dealing with some injuries, a rib injury, I believe. But Stephon Diggs has given you 11 or more targets in 4 of his last 5 games when he's played, so he's been highly targeted. 11, 15, 11, 15, 10, 13. Some targets on the year. So highly targeted, can make big plays, gets in the end zone every now and then. He has some juicy matchups moving forward. Has to play Chicago week 11. Okay, so not a great matchup, but he gets Green Bay the week after, and we know that they're susceptible to the pass. The Patriots, not a good matchup week 13. Seattle, not great week 14, but hopefully you have a bye. If not, hopefully you get past round 1. If you get past round 1, week 15, Stephon Diggs plays the Dolphins. They're going to get carved. And then championship week, they get to play a divisional game against the Lions, who look abysmal right now. So I love Stephon Diggs for the matchup against the Packers, potentially the Patriots, and then in championship week and semifinals week, the Dolphins and the Lions. Stephon Diggs is going to be a piece that wins you a championship.
Yeah. And it's funny how after a bye week or while a bye week's going on, you forget about a guy like Adam Thielen having an absolute career year, still second on the year for wide receivers. He has an MVP. He's been an MVP so far, absolutely. But if you see Stephon Diggs really stepping up, you're right. It was a rib injury coming back. I would love to see Diggs because I've got him I have him in another league, and I would love to see Stephon Diggs show out and come out. One more guy I'm going to talk about is going to be a guy that has finally got rid of his allergy for the end zone, and that is Julio Jones. He's had 2 games with 2 straight touchdowns. He has a great schedule to finish out the year. Dallas, New Orleans.
Please don't play week
Green
17.
Bay, Arizona, Carolina, and Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is week 17, so unless you play in week 17. Either way, yeah, absolutely right. Do not, if you do actually play in week 17, change the rules for next year to play week 16. You don't want to have all your starters be sat on your bench. Anyways, I think Julio Jones is going to be a lot of lineups. He's disappointed Well, it's funny to say disappointed, but he hasn't really had a bust of a game. His worst game was 8.7 points. The rest have been double digits. Um, he's an absolute stud, and he's finally in the end zone.
Speaking
so
of
he's going to be
playoff
on some winning
outlook,
teams. I don't think there's a matchup.
I've gotten
that
this
I'm
question
scared
from a
of
couple
when I've got
people,
Julio
and
Jones
they're
on my
saying
roster.
to me, I'm a middling team. I'm like a 500 team or just below 500 team. Time is running out. We only have 3 weeks until playoffs. If you play in the week 14, 15, 16 playoff schedule, which you should, is it too late for me? Can I still make the postseason? And for players who have those questions for you, what is your answer to them?
Absolutely, you can make postseason. I mean, unless you're mathematically out, which is a couple of you, but I am I think three. I won my third game this week. I'm 3-7, and I have an outside chance because the leader of my
Right.
division has 6 wins, and I have 3 weeks left to make the playoffs. I can make it. Technically, I can. And this is the time, everyone. This is the time where people stop caring because they've either sold their team or they aren't even making their make your claims, keep trying, and if you maybe you can't make the playoffs, time to get keepers, time to get the Josh Reynolds of the world, the Anthony Millers of the world. If you play in a keeper league, get those guys on your team, and then you keep them for next year, and then you have a better chance of winning.
The other thing I was going to say is a lot of teams right now, after your trade deadline, like our Gridiron Tradition League, there were 12 trades in trade deadline week, and 10 of those trades were, trades for picks. So they were unbalanced trades, guys selling off their teams for next year and guys acquiring for this year. And so you now have a shift in the balance of the league. There are potentially 6 or 7 out of 12 really strong teams. And then there are some lesser teams now that have sold off bigger pieces. So now you have unbalanced matchups. So if you have a good schedule and you play some of these teams that sold off and you sort of held out, now you've maybe got a couple easy wins. So
yeah, absolutely,
it's easy to make a run. If 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 happen to play each other that week, 2 of those guys are grabbing L's, and the ability for you to jump up is there. So yeah, don't give up. If you're within a spot or two or a win away from potentially grabbing that last playoff spot, make the push because the trade deadline has passed. So it's worth making the push. Don't give up. Keep making the right waiver wire claims. Keep asking start-sit questions and try your best to give yourself the best possible chance to win and get into the playoffs. Because once you get in, anything can happen.
That's the thing. Get into the playoffs because you're exactly right. Anything can happen week to week, and number 1 seed can go out first round if there's no buys.
100%.
We've seen what happens with the Allen Robinsons of the world, and I mean, we saw Aaron Jones coming, but look at that. He outperformed Kareem Hunt and Saquon Barkley, right? So that kind of stuff happens. And keep playing daily fantasy because that's fun too. And you actually make real money doing that rather than just throwing away money to Mackenzie in every league.
We need to do a DK showdown this week.
Absolutely, we do. I really wanted to do one last week, but we didn't have enough time.
Yeah,
but before we go, we have 5 minutes. Let's talk about this Thursday night. We've got the Green Bay Packers and the Seattle Seahawks. It's almost a pick'em game. Seattle's favored by 2.5. Who do you like winning? Just kidding. Of course, you like the Packers to win, but you think it's going to be
Why would you say that?
Game?
Why would you say that?
What do you think?
Is this going to be a close game? You know what? I'm going to go out and say that this will not be a close game. I think the Packers are going to come in and just dominate.
Oh, bold take from the Packers fan.
Take from the biased Packers fan. Here's why I say this. The Seahawks gave the Rams a run for their money. And if you listened to the podcast last week, I said these games between the Rams and Seahawks are traditionally always close. if you look back when Seattle was in championship winning years, even in those seasons, the Rams found a way to split with the Seahawks. And the Rams were nothing special at that point. It's just the nature of the matchup and the divisional games and the narratives that they create. They make closer games than they probably should be. Packers, Seahawks. Packers have won the last 3 matchups, 17-9, 38-10, and 27-17. The Packers will come in and win this game because in almost every single category, they are better in terms of league rankings. Okay? The only thing that the Seattle Seahawks are better than the Green Bay Packers at is rushing. That is it.
Right. Yep.
But the Packers are 7th in total offense. Seahawks are 22nd. Defense is about the same, 11th and 12th. Packers have a slight edge, surprisingly. Passing, the Packers are 6th in passing, and the Seahawks are 27th. And obviously the Seahawks hold the edge on rushing. But Aaron Jones is emerging. I just think this is a great narrative for the Packers.
You start Aaron Jones, and do you think Chris Carson's going to play?
I start Aaron Jones 100%. Do I think that Carson's going to play? Yes, I do think he's going to play. And if he doesn't, I think do you start Rashad Penny?
Well, that's it. I think you can start Rashad. You can start Rashad Penny if Chris Carson is out, but if he plays, I think he's the only guy to start in the matchup.
This Green Bay defense has been pretty good against the run all year.
Surprisingly.
No, not surprisingly. The problem with them lies in their secondary. That's why they spent those picks to get Jair Alexander, who's been amazing, and Josh Jackson as rookies in the first and second round. They wanted to beef up that secondary, bring in Tramon Williams. You got guys like Kevin King stepping up and filling some spots, but their secondary has been bad. And with a banged up Doug Baldwin, is
this a game? If you can't start Doug Baldwin here, when can you start him?
Yeah, essentially. And I wouldn't start Doug Baldwin. I don't have the confidence to do that.
Yeah, I don't blame you
at this point. So I'm gonna go out on a limb, say Packers come in, steamroll the Seahawks.
So do you start Tyler Lockett? Probably. If you're going to start one wide receiver, you're going to start them.
I start Lockett. I don't start Moore. I'm probably staying away from the backfield if Chris Carson doesn't play.
Yep.
I would play Chris Carson if he does play. MVS is a start for me. Marcus Valdes-Scantling, Devontae Adams, obviously. Staying away from Jimmy Graham. Rodgers, of course. And
Russell Wilson, he's been rushing the ball more. I think you can start Wilson.
Yeah, I think it's a good matchup for Wilson. He proves to be almost matchup proof. The one-man fantasy machine like a Todd Gurley. Last year, number 1 quarterback on the fantasy season. So I think you have to play Russell Wilson if you got him. But I'm going to stand by. I think Packers come in and win a game that they so desperately need to play. Both of the records aren't great. Packers 4-4-1. Seattle Seahawks 4-5. So, two teams probably expected a little bit more out of Packers for sure, but they're going to come in and get it done, even on Seattle's home field.
I like it, my friend. So I think that's all we got for the podcast. What do you think?
Yeah. It's going to be funny to see how the fantasy MVPs shake out. I'm really interested to see in a couple weeks' time when we look back at this podcast and say, we're either going to be amazingly right or horribly wrong, and hopefully we're more on the right side. But I listened back to a couple podcasts from the beginning of the season, and I'm like, oh man, how crazy different things are now, or wow, I can't believe we got that one spot on. So
there you go.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Cool, man. Well, have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again on Saturday morning.
Yeah, make sure you guys stay tuned with us. Hit us up on social media. Once again, we are on Instagram at Saturday Morning Snap and on Twitter at Mac_SMS and Landon_SMS. Have a great.
We got no more listeners right now. We could say whatever we wanted.
Yeah?
And it might be just Taylor. Tweet us if you're still listening, hashtag Trade City.
Hashtag late push.
Late push. There you go. I like
Hashtag Aaron's gonna get wrecked this week.
that. All right, my man. Have a good week.
All right, bud. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Mac_SMS and Landon_SMS. Support this independent podcast at patreon.com/Saturday Morning Snap.